Thank you all for tuning in. Now, I can't promise you the outcome that you're gonna get from watching this, but what I can tell you, if you apply what you're about to learn, this will change your financial future. If you're here, it's probably because you're ready for change. And what you're gonna learn in tonight's training will do just that. So if taking back control of your money isn't enough to keep you glued to this screen for the next 90 minutes, I think it's time to reassess your priorities. And tonight, we've got a special guest. My good friend Brian is gonna be doing the training, and here's what you can expect to learn. Number one, you're gonna learn how to take back control of your money. And you're gonna do that by learning how to be the bank. Number two, you're gonna learn how to build wealth through your own debts and expenses. And you can do that without working harder, without working longer, and without taking on any additional risk. And number three, you're gonna learn how to get all the money back for every single car you will ever buy, drive, and own. That's exactly what you're gonna learn in tonight's training, so get ready, get set, let's go.
Take back control.
Tuesday night.
Tuesday?
I tend to start this with a question. I want you guys to think about this question. Now, this question is this: what in life should you control? Now, there's three things that I believe that we all should control in life. So anybody want to take a guess as to what those three things are, or at least one of those things that you should want to control in your life? Now, there's lots of things we want to control, but there's three things, especially when it comes to what we're going to be talking about here today, that I believe that you should want to control. So anybody want to take a guess as to what one of those things are? So the first one actually is money. Right? Money, expenses. Yeah, exactly. So we want to control money. That's one of the things that everybody says, hey, once I can control money, I can control other things in my life, right? So, but here's the thing. Most of us are doing what when it comes to money? We're trading time for money. But here's the second thing you want to control is also time. Yet if you have a job, you're trading time for money, you might not be in control of your money or your time. So when you control money, though, you can control time. So for me, by the way, personally, time is my biggest thing that I want to control. I choose to do what I'm doing. Like right now, I choose to do this. I choose when I want to work, I guess, if you want to call it. So I'm in control of both of these things. And it took me time to get there, right? I was not always in control of the two things. But there's one thing above all else that you have to control first before you can control time and money. And that third thing is your mindset. What's going on up here? Call it knowledge, call it mindset, but you've got to control your thoughts and your knowledge, subconscious programming, people call that, before you can control time and money. Because as you go through life, we are programmed or taught to think a certain way around money, especially, right? And even time. It's why, like for me, and I'll kind of share a little bit about myself, my history, but I traded time for money for a long time and I was miserable, right? And so it took me quite some time to change what's going on up here in my mind before I could actually control those two things. But that's what we're going to be talking about here today, this strategy that can help you do that. And I want to share this quote by Will Rogers that we here at the BYOB team like. And that it says, the problem in America isn't so much what people don't know, it's what people think they know that just isn't so. So there you go. All right. Now I want you to envision this. I want you to envision 100 18-year-old kids in a room, and you go ask every single one of them, where will they be at the age of retirement, say 65 years old? What do you think those kids are going to say? Are they going to say, I'm going to be broke and poor? No, of course not. They're going to say, hey, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to have, achieved all of my dreams. But here's the fact of the matter. If you fast forward to when they're 65 years old, only 5 out of 100 of those kids, 5%, by the way, of them will be financially secure at the age of retirement. And that stat comes from, by the way, the Social Security Administration. Think of this for a second. Only 5% of those 100 people, when they hit the age of 65, will be financially secure. Not free, by the way, just secure. And that's kind of crazy living here in the United States or Canada. We have all these opportunities, but only 5% achieve that level. Now, let me ask everybody here a question. Do you want to be one of those 5 people? It's kind of a simple question, right? But that's why you're here, because we want to be one of those 5%. We want to achieve that level of financial success, I guess I would say. And the concept we're going to be talking about here today is one of the main ways that you can do that. And by the way, I have studied a lot of very wealthy, successful people. Most of them are doing things like this, but they're doing things differently, because if you want different results, more of the 5%, you've got to do things a bit differently, in my opinion. And this is one of those ways. All right, so a quick, background on me. So I started out life the traditional way. I went to college, went to Washington State University. Go Cougs, by the way. Not that I watch them as their the football team is not the best, but I went there and got a degree in construction management and business, and that's what I did for many, many years. I was raised lower class. Didn't really learn about money or even talk about it in my household. Great family though. My parents are still together, all that kind of stuff. But I really didn't know how money worked. And so I went that traditional path, went to school, tried to get good grades, got into corporate America, had a 401k, all that kind of stuff, had the house, had the growing family, and all the associated debt, by the way. And I was told that I was living the American dream. Well, it felt like the American nightmare to me because I was drowning in debt. I did not like my job. I hated going to the office, all that kind of stuff. And so, fast forward, after 10 years, I was actually at a doctor's office. And if you remember, before we had these little cell phones, these little devices, right? There'd be magazines on the center little coffee table. And I picked one up, and it was a financial article or magazine on, can't remember what it was even called, but I opened up to this article that talked about millionaires. And it said that the millionaire knows their net worth, but most people don't. And I realized I don't know my net worth, and I know that I'm not a millionaire. So when I went home, I went and did the math on this piece of paper. That's the actual piece of paper. I've lost it, but I took a picture of it many years ago. And I had a negative net worth. After over 10 years in corporate America, I had all this debt. I had all this stuff going on. And I was like, I'm worth a negative amount of money. And fast forward, I was going to be worth less and less because of drowning in debt and interest and all this stuff. And I was like, what the heck is going on? That's not the word that I use, by the way. Kind of kicked me in the pants a little bit. But then my grandfather, who was my idol, he passed away. And he had worked his entire life up to around 68 years old to retire and then live the good life in retirement and is going to travel with his wife, my grandmother. But he passed away not that long after he retired because he got Parkinson's, he had leukemia and some other things, and he did not get to live that life in retirement. One of the last things he told me was, live your life, Brian, now, don't wait. I took that to heart and I ended up leaving corporate America, and that was my journey. And that journey led me to being an entrepreneur, to buying businesses, and learning about this concept we're going to be talking about here today. And this is one of my tax returns, and I share this just because this whole concept transformed my life. When I learned about this, and this business, by the way, this is 2021, so during COVID, did over 2 million in revenue. And one of the main things it did was talk about this concept. And so it really changed my life and allowed me to do a lot of things, control time. So I've had a lot of experiences with my family, traveling, things I never would have done if I had just kept doing the same thing over and over again. And this concept was one of the main ways that I was able to do this kind of stuff. And I've even had the opportunity to speak on stages or in front of very, very high net worth individuals and very successful people and teach them this concept. So I love talking about this. That's why I talk so fast about it, because I get very excited. But yeah, I love talking about this. Now, I want you to understand one thing when we go through this is this is not a new concept. It's been around for well over 150 years, been around for a long time. And a lot of people do talk about it, but you may not realize what they're talking about. So who are some of the people that do talk about this strategy? Robert Kiyosaki, he talks about it in his book, Second Chance. And in fact, I know many of his personal advisors personally. I've known them or worked with them. One of them was my mentor, and he was my mentor in this concept. Tony Robbins talks about it in his book, Money Master the Game. I've been to at least two of his big events. They were pretty fun. And then obviously Becoming Your Own Banker, Unlock the Infinite Banking Concept by R. Nelson Nash. Nelson is the gentleman that popularized this strategy in the 80s and 90s. And then, of course, my mentor and friend, Brent Kessler and Chris Naugle, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery, and Chris's book, The Private Money Guide. Now, I recommend all these books, by the way. Who has used this strategy throughout history? Now, this is pretty incredible because this has been used many times by very successful people throughout history, but you may not have known about it. But Jim Harbaugh, by the way, one of college's top paid coaches, he was paid through this concept, through cash value life insurance. And I've talked to people about why they would do this. It's pretty incredible why they did this. Very, very smart move by the college. And you may remember this individual. You may not remember him. His name is Joe Biden. So former president. He has actually, I think it's 6 of these policies. And his wife, I think, disclosed those. They had to disclose that at some point in time. But yeah, he's got a bunch of these policies. And then Walt Disney. So his cool story here. So Walt Disney could not get bank financing to start Disneyland. And he had this concept. This is back in the 1913, something around there, 14, 30s. I can't remember when he started Disneyland, but back in the early 1900s. But he used this concept to start and fund Disneyland. So without this concept, we might not have Disneyland as we know it today. Kind of crazy. Ray Kroc, he actually used this concept to fund the growth of McDonald's during the first 8 years to help with cash flow and paying the salaries, things like that. And the Pampered Chef. So she used a little bit of funds from one of these policies to start that business, of course, which now it's a billion-dollar company. And Warren Buffett, I think, has it still. And then lots and lots of wealthy families, the Morgans, JPs, Chases, the Vanderbilts, especially the Rockefellers. They started doing this concept back in the 1880s or 90s. They've been doing it for a long time. Now, to understand why we want to learn about this concept, why we're here on this presentation, you got to understand what infinite banking, what this concept will do for you. So here's what it's going to do for you. So one, it creates guaranteed tax-free, by the way, tax-free generational wealth day one. Not day, year 40 down the road, but day one, it has that benefit. It allows your money to grow uninterrupted, compounded for the rest of your life with guarantees. I love guarantees, by the way, but your money's going to grow uninterrupted for the rest of your life. It takes the control of your money away from the big banks, away from Wall Street, and puts it into your hands. Remember how I talked about control of your money at the beginning, control of time? Well, this is one of the best ways that I have ever seen to take that control and put it into your hands and not the bank's hands, not corporate America. It also protects your money, because if you make your money, you want to keep your money. You want to protect it. By the way, it is not very well protected in the banks. I know people that have lost a lot of money by leaving their money in a bank that went bankrupt. Kind of crazy. But yeah, so it protects it from lawsuits, from bankruptcy, divorce, creditors. In most states, by the way, it's state specific. But one of the biggest things it does is it allows you to be the bank for things you may normally use a bank for. Think of things like real estate investing, college, cars, homes, investments, retirement. But it does all of these things at the exact same time, not one or the other, but all at the same time. So like things like real estate, your money is in real estate. It's not somewhere else. It's in the real estate. Okay. If it's in the 401k, it's only in the 401k. With this, it can be inside the policy, earning interest, growing for the rest of your life, and also in real estate, also in an investment, also buying the car, whatever you want. So it's in more than one place at the same time. Remember I said the main thing you've got to control before anything else is your mindset. Now, why do I say that? Well, think about this. So who learns quickly? Well, kids learn things very quickly because they're open to learning, right? They learn how to ride a bike quickly. And if you ever learned how to ride a bike, typically, if you haven't ridden one in 5 years, you can still hop on a bike and ride it again because you have that in your mind. You know how to ride the bicycle. But here's the thing. What if the bicycle did not work the way that you would expect? What if you hopped on it and it was the backwards bicycle? Right? This is kind of fun. What if you hopped on the bicycle and you turned the handlebars to the left and the tire went to the right, or vice versa? Well, guess what? There's a video called The Backwards Bicycle. You can go watch it later on. It's hilarious. The guy falls off the bike. He can't ride it. But guess what happens? As he practices, he reprograms his thinking around how the bike should work. And all of a sudden, he can ride the backwards bicycle. Now, here's the crazy thing. When he goes and gets back on the regular bicycle, he cannot ride the regular bicycle anymore because he reprogrammed how in his mind how the bike should work. It's the same thing around money. We are taught or programmed a certain way to think about money, but that might not be the correct way. So when you reprogram your mind around money, it's very hard to go back to the regular way of thinking about money. Same with the backwards bicycle. That's the analogy. So as we go through the presentation, definitely keep an open mind around money and what we're talking about. So I want you to think about this. Why aren't more people successful? Remember how I said 5 out of 100 people at the age of retirement are financially, secured? So here's the mysteries around money. So these are the things that kill wealth. Now, there's lots of things that can kill wealth, but here's some main things. One is taxes. I don't mind paying taxes, but I'm a lot happier paying a lot less, by the way. All right. Inflation, the hidden tax, as we call it. If your money's just sitting there doing nothing, it's actually losing value because of inflation, which is obviously inflating of the money supply. Volatility, the markets, things like that. Interest is one of the biggest things that kills wealth. The average family pays about $20,000 a year in interest here in the US, by the way. Mindset. So what's the mindset killer? So, one, following that status quo, doing what everybody else around you is doing. If they're not successful, you're not going to be successful. That kind of stuff. Fear is one of the big things that keeps us from being successful because we don't do things differently. Life in general, life happens. You probably heard that saying before. And then what we're taught. What we're taught about money, about success, about things like that can really, really hold us back. Think about this. So, what's the definition of money? So, it's just a means of exchange. That's all it is. Okay. What company uses compound interest? Now, a lot of people will say, "Hey, banks use compound interest." No, they don't. They charge you interest and they put the money to work to create interest, but they don't really use compound interest themselves. In fact, no business really uses compound interest. They might try to earn it, but they're not really using it. Are your dollars worth more today or in the future? Now, think about this. Why am I asking this question? Well, if you went 20 years ago and you had a dollar bill and went to a candy store, how much candy could you get? Maybe a small bag, right? Well, today, if you go to a candy store with a dollar bill, you might get half a candy bar if you're lucky. So your dollars are worth more today than they are in the future. Think about this question. Will taxes go up or down? Historically, they've always gone up, right? And they're always adding more taxes, increasing taxes, 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 taxes. So taxes today are probably less than they will be down the road. Now, think about this question here. Would you wait to eat bread or drink milk? Now, what do I mean by that? What if you went and bought a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk and you put it in the freezer? And then 10 years down the road, you open up the freezer and now you've got 2 loaves of bread and 2 gallons of milk. Well, they're going to be freezer burned. They're not going to taste very good. So is that a good thing to do? Well, no. But here's the thing. So we wouldn't do that with food, but we do it with our money. What do I mean by that? So think of a 401k or a retirement account. You put your money in there and it hopefully grows over time, but volatility might go down, it'll go up, but you cannot use it, right? So your taxes are going to be more when you take it out. Your dollars are going to be less down the road. And yet that's what we do with money. But we don't do that with things that money buys. Food, vehicles, cars. We use those things today, but then we put our money and put it somewhere and we don't use it right away. So it's kind of very interesting. So now let's think about how our money flows. So if we want to understand how to be the bank, right, we've got to also understand how money flows. So let's look at a typical transaction that most of us are familiar with, buying a car. So let's say that we're going to go buy a car for $25,000. Doesn't matter what kind of car, not a Ferrari or maybe a tire for one, but we're going to go buy a car for $25,000. Now let's just say that we happen to have $25,000 in the bank. So what are we going to do? We're going to go take the cash out of the bank to buy the car. But what if you go to do that? You go to the bank and the banker says, "Hey, wait a second, Brian, before you do this, let me give you a proposition. What if instead of you taking the cash out, what if I give you 4% on your money in the bank, you leave it here, and I'll give you collateral, or the money's your collateral for a loan. I'll give you a loan. So Brian, I'm going to give you a loan at 6% for 60 months, and I'm going to pay you 4% on your money for 60 months. Does that make sense? Would you do that with the bank? Well, here's the math. It's just math, by the way. That's why I love this concept. It's just math. So your monthly payments on the car note is going to be $483 per month, which means the future value of all those payments is $28,999. But what's the future value of your money that is in the bank earning 4%? It's $30,525, which means you made $1,526 because you're earning 4% on an increasing balance and you're paying 6% on a decreasing balance. Just math. Now, some people say, well, Brian, that doesn't make any sense because I have a loan payment. If I paid cash, I'd have no loan payment. That's true, except here's the question I pose to you. How did you get the $25,000 in the bank in the first place? Oh, I saved it up every month. Okay, so if you spend $25,000 of cash, you have no savings left. Are you going to save every month again? Yes. Then your cash flow is no different in this example, except you made money doing it this way. So if that makes sense. So let's talk about what we're going to be going through here today, the money multiplier method. So there's 3 things we're going to cover. One is the machine. What makes this thing function? What is that machine? The second part is the marathon, because building wealth is a marathon and not a sprint. Yes, you can sprint in a marathon, but you're going to slow down real quick. So it's a marathon, right? And then, of course, the third thing is everybody's favorite topic is the millionaire. How do we build wealth? How do we put our money to work and create more wealth in our lives? All right, so let's dive in. So what is the machine that makes infinite banking function? So what I want you to envision is this. Think of a car, okay? A car has tires, it has wheels, it has brakes, all these kinds of things. Now, when you go to buy a car at a car lot, you're going to want to know what the engine is inside that car, okay? So infinite banking needs an engine. just like a car needs an engine. What is that engine? That engine is a specially designed dividend-paying whole life insurance policy from a mutual insurance company. Okay, that's what it is. So once again, so the engine is a specially designed, by the way, dividend-paying whole life insurance company or policy with a mutual insurance company. Okay, so that is the engine. So we're going to go through what that is. Now you might say, "Well, Brian, why life insurance? Who else is using this?" Well, guess what? So I always want to share this. So banks are the biggest purchasers of whole life insurance policies. In fact, banks own more whole life than they do their buildings and real estate combined, which is crazy, by the way, crazy. But if they're doing it, why? Do they know something that we don't? Absolutely. So yeah, so let's go through how this works. Now, before I get into the machine, what we have to understand first is how our money flows through our lives. So let's kind of go through that. So once again, I showed you this example here of how you can make more money earning 4% while paying 6%. So I showed you that already. Knowing that, maybe we should be doing something different with our money. So let's understand how banks use money, because if we're going to be the bank, we've got to understand how banks flow money. So let's just imagine that you give $100,000 to a bank and they're going to pay you 4%. Cool, right? But does the bank just sit on your money? Well, no, of course not. They put that money into motion, right? This is crazy, by the way. So what do? Well, they loan that money back out, maybe 7% on a home. Maybe it's a 7-year ARM, something like that. But when the person sells you their home, right, do they just sit on that money? Well, no, the seller puts the money typically right back into a bank again. But the bank does not sit on that money. They put it into motion. Car loan. What's the car company do? Back into the bank. What's the bank do? Puts it right back out again, maybe on a home remodel loan. What's the contractor do? Back into the bank. What's the bank do, right? They put it back into motion again. Maybe it's on a debt consolidation loan, something like that. What's the credit card company do? They're typically a bank, though, by the way. Goes right back into the bank. So the bank is putting your money into motion. Money in motion makes money. In fact, the bank is making 500% more off of your money than they're paying you. It's just math, by the way. Now, if you're thinking, well, is that really true? Well, guess what? BauerFinancial.com, they will show you exactly how much banks are making off of your money. It's typically 400 to 1,300% on the money that you leave there. That's how much they are making because they put that money into motion, right? So, and you can go back, I think you can go back in history and look at how much banks have made historically on your money because it obviously fluctuates. Now, let's look at how we flow money through our own lives. So this is the annual pattern of spending for the typical kind of household here in the United States. So for every dollar that comes into your hands, it goes right back out the door in most cases. So where does it go? Well, for every dollar you earn, 20 cents goes to automobiles, 30 cents goes to housing, rent, mortgage, upkeep, things like that. 40 cents goes to everything else. So that is 90 cents right there. 90 cents goes right back out to somebody else, not to you. Yep. 10% is what we try to save. Now, that savings rate goes up and down throughout history. Before COVID, I think it was a negative number, which is scary, by the way. Then during COVID, we went really high. And right now it's low again. It's not very high. So yeah, but that's how our money flows. Now, think about this, though. So when it comes to infinite banking, we don't want to look at our savings. Yes, we want to acknowledge that. But what we're going to look at is the interest that we're spending, because interest is one of those things that kills wealth. So we want to understand where is that interest going? Well, let's look at it. So for automobiles, 20 cents goes out, but 5 cents of that is interest. So what if we recapture that interest back into our hands or our bank, right? On housing, it's even worse. So 30 cents goes out, but 25 cents of that average is interest. That's because of amortized mortgages, by the way, an amortized loan. It's mainly interest. So what if we recaptured that back into our bank? And then 40 cents goes out to everything else. And let's just assume because of credit cards, things like that, toys, RVs, things like that, boats, 5 cents of that is interest. What if we recaptured that? So you can see, if you look at this, if you become the bank and if you can recapture some of that interest going back out, you're going to have more money, which is obviously wealth. Now, what I want to do now is I want to go through an example of the engine, the policy and how it works, but how it can be used for a typical transaction that most of us are familiar with. I already explained what that transaction was in that first example of a bank. It's a car. So I'm going to show you how to get all the money back for every car that you'll ever buy, drive, and own. And I like classic cars, by the way. I'm going to replace this slide with my own car. I have a 67 Mercury Cougar that I restored, but and I used to have a Mustang, which I wish I had never sold, but it was not that one. That's an Eleanor, very expensive car. All right, so let's look under the hood of what makes the infinite banking car go down the road. What is that engine? So it is what we call a policy. And this right here is what I call a policy illustration. And you're going to see some different columns here. All right, you're going to see policy year, the age, and then deposits. Well, what are deposits? Well, that's a premium. That's what they call them, but we call them premium deposits because when you deposit this into your bank, you can actually use that money, take it back out. That's called cash value. You'll see that right over here, cash value in the account. Yes, there is a death benefit, by the way, but we're not going to really focus on that too much. Age. So people say, well, Brian, I'm 55 years old, 65 years old. Can I do this? Well, age doesn't typically matter. Obviously, as we get into our 70s, it does come into play, but age typically does not matter because we're not focusing on the death benefit. We're focusing on the living benefits. So this is not the big focus over here. The living benefits of what we can use this for are what we try to focus on. You can also own policies on other people that you have insurable interest on. So I have lots and lots of clients that have policies. They own it, but the person that's insured is somebody else, spouse, kids, things like that. All right, so let's go ahead and look at an example. So this is the machine. So this is how to recapture those car payments. So in this example, we're going to deposit $10,000 per year, annual, monthly, doesn't really matter, but we're going to put in 10,000 deposits into this policy. That's going to grow our cash value every time we deposit this. Now, I want to be very clear here. This is an extremely conservative example. I do that on purpose because I want to make sure that we set expectations, low so that we can make them, the results are very high. But this is a very conservative numbers here. Now, let's say that at the end of year 3, you want to buy a new car. Remember the one for $25,000? Same thing here. So we're going to go to our bank and we're going to withdraw $25,000. Now, we're going to be responsible though. We are going to pay that loan back because we are going to treat our bank like we would any other bank. We want to be a responsible banker. We're going to pay back $500 per month as an example. That's $6,000 per year. So what does the math look like now at the end of 7 years? Well, we put in $70,000 in deposits. We've also paid back a loan. That's $30,000. So that's $100,000 that we have put towards this infinite banking machine. Now, keep in mind, we took out $25,000 though as cash and we bought a car with it. Now you can do whatever you want. You can invest it. You can put it into a real estate, do whatever you want with it. But in this example, bought a car. So in reality, we have put in $75,000 into this infinite banking machine. But here's the crazy thing. Look at this. We have 67,000 of cash value, which means we have recaptured 91 cents or 91% of every dollar that we put in. Now, typically when I build these things, it'd be over 100% or over $1, but I want to be conservative. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. So if you guys are paying attention here, this is kind of fun. Let's look at years 8 through 12 now. Now, in years 8 through 12, in this example, we decide to no longer put any more deposits into the bank, which you don't have to do, by the way. You can choose to do that. And yet, check this out. The cash value still goes up. It still grows. And let's say at year 8, you want to get another car. Maybe you have a daughter that's turning 16. My daughter's about to turn 16 next year. Please help me. So you go to buy another car, $25,000. So what's the math look like now? So you pay back that loan just like you did the first one. That's $6,000 per year. So we have put in an additional $30,000 towards the machine, infinite banking, but we took out $25,000. So we really only put in $5,000. So in years 8 through 12, we put in basically $5,000, but the policy grew by $23,592. So $5,000 turned in, grew by $23,000. But here's the very interesting part of this example. How much have we put into this infinite banking machine so far? $75,000 over here and $5,000 over here. That's $80,000. But how much cash value do we have access to? $91,000. So if you didn't get anything out of this example, I want you to get this one thing. You put in $80,000, you have liquid access to $91,000, and you own 2 cars outright. Make sense? Very good. So that's a simple example right there of how this can work. So there's three rules when it comes to infinite banking that I want to make sure that we are following, that we want to be aware of. So they're right there. Rule 1, rule 2, rule 3. What are those rules? So rule 1 is pay yourself first. We're so used to paying everybody else first. We've got to break that habit and pay ourselves first. Then the money can go back out. This, by the way, is one of the biggest things to understand. Pay yourself first, not everybody else, because we're used to having whatever's left over at the end of the month as our cash. Pay yourself first. Pay yourself with interest. If you're going to be the bank, treat yourself like a bank. Pay yourself back with interest. And last is recycle and recapture your money. What that means is if you're going to go do things like a bank, use your banking policy first. So recycle and recapture all that money by running it through the policy. And guess what? Your net worth goes up at the exact same time you're doing banking over here. So if this works for a car, what else can this work for? So debts. So one of the biggest things a lot of our clients do or use infinite banking for is to recapture and pay off debts quickly. I'm going to go through an example of this. Now, if you don't have debt, don't worry about it. There's obviously that's great. Building wealth is sort of that next phase. So let's go ahead and look at this example though. In this example, this is a 45-year-old chiropractor. This person has 9 third-party debts. They are a total of $478,000 in debt. They're paying $5,777 per month, almost 70 grand per year. And if they paid all of these things as scheduled, it would take them 19 years to pay all these debts off. Now, if they're in that debt cycle and their mindset is really, traditional around money, they're probably never going to get out of debt. They're going to pay off one thing, get another debt, pay off this, get another debt, pay off this credit card, use it again. But they're going to change their mindset. So this is actually an example of policy that we built for someone years ago. Now, this person said, hey, I want to do this. So here's how it works. So in this example, they are going to start a policy, infinite banking, and they're going to put in $25,000 into this at the beginning of every year. Now, if you're saying, Brian, I don't have 25 grand, that's fine. Your numbers are your numbers. This is just this person's numbers. Now, the second question is, well, where'd they get $25,000 from? If they had that left over, why wouldn't they just pay their debts off with 25 grand? Because what this person did is they were taking money because they own their own chiropractor business. They were taking money out of the business and putting it into retirement strategies, 401k, IRA, and something else. And so what they did is they said, hey, I'm going to take some of the money going over in this bucket, retirement bucket, and put it into infinite banking. So their cash flow did not change. They just moved the money from this bucket to this bucket. That's what they did. So year one, they put in 25,000. Now immediately there's 14,863 of cash value available within 30 days. Now I'm going to be very clear. This, once again, it was a very conservative numbers. In most cases, they'd have access to around $19,000 to $22,000, a bit more. But once again, I want to show you a conservative example here. So what do? Well, they borrow the 14,000 out of the policy and they pay off Discover, Lowe's, and part of the Nordstrom's credit card. Now what happens is their monthly payment was reduced by $448 because they paid off those ones. Now this person, following our leadership, our examples, they don't just spend that 448. They actually capture that. Remember rule number 3, recycle and recapture. They're recapturing that 448 back into their own hands. So what that means is year 2, they do another $25,000 premium deposit, and the payments of 448 back to themselves equals $5,374. So the total cash they have available to loan it back out to themselves is $21,945. So that's what they do. They loan it back out, and now they pay off Nordstrom's, Wells Fargo, the private loan, and part of the BMW. So by the way, as they're paying these things off, it's going into their policy as a loan. Just keep that in mind. And yet all these debts are coming off of their credit report or credit score, right? Because the policy loan is private and does not show up on their credit score. So that is also something that really is powerful with infinite banking. Now their monthly payment has dropped by $1,917. Let's go to year 3. Year 3, same thing. They deposit $25,000 in. The cash value available jumps up by $25,541. The payments of $1,917 back to themselves equals $23,004. So now they have $48,000 available to loan back out. And guess what they do? Wipe out BMW, wipe out West Marine, and wipe out part of the condo. And their monthly payment has dropped now by $3,677. Now, before I go to year 4, I'm going to pause here for a second. So I want you to see how much what we've done so far. So we have put in $25,000 times 3 years. That's $75,000. And we have loaned ourselves around $55,000. So the question is, these policies, they grow, right? Every year. That's called dividends, by the way. The question is how much are you earning dividends on? Well, some people will say $20,000, right? Because you've taken out 55. But the way these things work, uninterrupted compounding means that you're earning interest on the $75,000, not just 20,000. So that's why these things are growing uninterrupted year over year. Let's go to year 4. Same thing happens. 25 goes in, cash value jumps up by 26,304, and the payments are 3,677 back to himself is 44,124. So he has $70,000 available. What's he do? Well, he wipes out the condo, wipes out a big chunk of the condo. Now, one thing to understand here is the monthly payment does not change, though, in year 4 because these are amortized loans on the condo and the house. Amortized loans, if you pay the principal down, the monthly does not change. So just keep that in mind. Now, in year 5, he puts in 25,000. Cash value jumps up by 27,000, so more than he put into it, which is pretty cool. The payments back to himself are 44,000, so the total cash is 71,000 and change. Now he wipes out the condo and part of the house. The monthly payment now has dropped by 4,556. Now this is kind of cool. So this gentleman, this client in year 6, he said, "Hey, this thing is working like it's amazing. It's awesome. I want to do more of this." So he decides, "I'm going to do a second policy." Now, what's he do? So with the first policy, he reduces the premium from $25,000 down to $10,000. Yet look at this right here. The cash value still goes up by $13,092. Okay, it still goes up by that amount right there. Okay. On the second policy, he puts in another $25,000 on that second policy. Cash value goes up by $14,863. Okay. Now what happens here? So the total payments back to himself, because now he's got that condo paid off. Now he has $54,000 of payments back to himself. Total cash is $82,000. The house is only $76,000. So what's he do? Well, he borrows enough to pay off the house. And now all of his debts are wiped out and he has freed up $5,777 of cash flow. That's year 6. So now throughout year 6 and part of year 7, what he does is he takes that $5,777 and he pays back his own bank loan, his policy. He pays it back. So at the end of year 7, he has all of this cash value in his policy, multiple 6 figures, by the way, that is now free and clear to go put to work and create assets, buy, real estate, whatever, create cash flow. And he has no other debts and he has all this cash flow. And he did it in 7 years, not 19. Now, if you're saying, "Brian, that was a lot of numbers, a lot of math. I don't even know how I would do this." Well, here's the thing. We have something called the Vault. You can go check it out at byobvault.com. This is a custom built software that we built over 2 years that does a lot of things. It does a lot of things. And it will show you how to do exactly what I just did on the screen there really quickly. It's called the Debt Blaster. It'll map out month by month how to do exactly that, what bills to pay, how to pay them, when to do it, all that kind of stuff. If you're doing like velocity banking or know that concept, this actually shows you how to do velocity banking, which I won't get into here on this call, but this thing does a lot of things. It's amazing. And so if you so want, you can go and use that software to do exactly that. We also have what's called an implementation agent team. So when you have a policy through us, by the way, one of our clients, we have a team you can call them up whenever you want and ask them, "Hey, I want to go do this over here. What's the best way to do it?" Or "I want to go do this over here. What's the best way to do it?" And they're going to show you the best way to do what it is. So think of it like your own guide, your personal guide as you go through this journey. So you're never going to be left, in the dust, nothing like that. And there's no cost, no fees to using that team. Obviously, the software has that is a subscription model, but so we're always here to help you out. All right, so let's kind of go through the Millionaire method, because when you look at building wealth, some questions come up. What if I have no bad debt? What if I don't need that new car like you just showed right there? Can I still benefit from privatized banking, and should I become my own banker? Well, yes, because once you are at that point, this is when it becomes a lot of fun, because now you're going to create that legacy and build wealth. So let's go ahead and get into that. And then someone had a question here. Will it be any replays? Yes, this is being recorded. It will be on our YouTube channel, I think on Saturday. That's when we typically get it up. So yeah. So you can create wealth in multiple ways. Now, these are ways that my clients have done this in their own lives. So active real estate investors. I've done a lot of real estate in my life. Wholesalers, flippers, buy and hold. Commercial properties. So think of like apartments, mobile homes, which I really want to get into that someday. I've done some stuff in mobile homes, but man, I really want to get back into that. Private funds and passive real estate. So lending, being the bank for somebody else in real estate is a great example. I'm going to go through some real examples, by the way, of this. So you're going to see some real numbers and some real illustrations. Business owners, lots of business owners use this as a line of credit. Stocks and options traders, startups, and even equipment flipping. We have a person that we know that does that. They flip forklifts. So pretty cool. There's lots of ways to use these things to build wealth. Your imagination right there. All right. So what I want to do right now is I want to go through an example of how this works, this infinite banking works. For private lending, so private money lending, because we have a lot of clients that do that. We even have a platform called the Private Money Club where people do lend and borrow money for mainly real estate deals. So this is an example. So this is what we call a tabular detail that is part of a policy illustration. So what you're going to see here is a few things. You're going to see age and year on the left-hand side, contract premium over here, and then you're going to see way over here, cash value numbers. So here's the premium side. So you're going to say, okay, so this person's depositing $150,000 year one. You're saying, well, Brian, that's a lot of money. I don't have that. Once again, this is their numbers. Your numbers are your own. Okay. And so I'll go through that with you on a one-on-one call. So they're doing what's called a dump in of $100,000. It's a one-time deposit to overfund the cash value. And they're doing a $50,000 per year premium deposit. Now, what you'll notice, a couple of things, what you'll notice is the premiums are not forever on these kinds of policies. And in fact, you'll see it right here. Look at year 11. The premiums are actually going down over time. They put in $150,000 in year one. You can see they have immediate cash value there. Now, what I want you to look at is what happens over time. So the cash value grows and grows and grows. But what I want you to understand is the compounding. So let's go ahead and look at year 8. In year 8, the cash value went up by $66,722. But how much did they put in? Well, they only put in $48,594. So what's the math on this? The math is it grew by $18,000 above what they put in, which is a 37% cash on cash return. Who here wants to have a 37% cash on cash return on their money? Me, right? But let's see what it looks like when you use it with private lending. So in this example, this person goes and they borrows the money out of the policy, right? That's called a policy loan, and they lend it to somebody else at 12%. So what's the math on this? 12% private money lending plus the 37% private bank that they're already growing the money by that amount. 5% interest on the policy loan means they're getting a 44% cash on cash return. But here's the fun thing. So they did nothing different, by the way, than where their money went first, because this person was already private lending. So keep that in mind. They were already private lending, making 12%. But now doing this, and yes, I'm going 8 years down the road, of course, but they're making 44% on their money, not just 12, but 44%, which is insane. So there you go. Be your own banker. That's a great example right there. Now, how this works and how it does that is because of uninterrupted compounding. So uninterrupted compounding means that the longer you have it in place, the better and better it gets. So as an example on this one, this is just math. So this person did a $50,000 dump in. They did about $6,000 per year or per month premium. And look at the numbers here. In year 2, 21% return, access to capital is 121%. Year 10, 54% cash on cash, 154% access to capital. That means they have more access or more money they can access than they put into the policy. 25 years down the road, 281% cash on cash and 381% access to capital. So that is uninterrupted compounding right there in this pure math form. So the millionaire method. So what is that? So how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I always say that the man at the top of the mountain didn't fall there, because if you see someone who is successful, like as an example, you see someone doing infinite banking, they're like way over here at the top of the mountain. How did they get there? Well, they took a step, right? They took that first step to climb the mountain. Most people, by the way, are walking around the mountain, pointing at the very top saying, I want to be that guy, but they keep walking in circles. They do not do something different and actually start walking up the mountain. Okay. So just kind of something to kind of keep in mind. All right. The machine works for debt and expenses, vacations, homes, taxes, everything else. So what I want you to understand is let's look at a big purchase as an example. I want to show you kind of how this can work generationally. So remember the doctor, he had those 2 homes. Now, if he paid those homes as originally scheduled with the bank, he would have paid out of pocket $493,000. That's how much he would have paid out of pocket. Now, if he had done infinite banking, obviously earlier in life, and it had grown, and he's able to be the bank for those two big purchases, and let's just say that he was earning 4% inside the his infinite banking policy, it's actually more than that, but I'm going to use 4% to be conservative. The cash would have grown, his policy would have grown, and he would have access to, after paying those houses off, $749,000. That's how much he would have in his hands. So either out of pocket 493 or have access to 749,000. That's a swing of over seven figures, over $1 million. Now, if you're saying, well, Brian, how do we look at investments? How do we run numbers on different scenarios? Well, the vault does that, by the way. So inside the vault, I think we just put this inside there. It's called the gain projector, where you can actually look at investing opportunities. You can put them inside there and run numbers on, let's say, real estate or private lending deals, and it'll show you how much you're going to make on that by using infinite banking with it. So it'll map out everything for you. Now that you know what this can do for you, and by the way, I have some more examples, some more slides I'm going to go through. A lot of the questions I get, I'm going to go through some of those as well. I believe that everybody should do this, or at least learn about how this could work, because if it doesn't work for you, could it work for your family? Could it work for your grandkids and children, other people? Man, I love it when people do share this information with their family, because it can change your life. It definitely can. So what is kind of the shift that infinite banking can do for you? So there's two guys on the screen right here. It's this picture. Okay, you've got the guy on the bottom, trading time for money, working for money. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I still do that. But then there's the guy on the top where his money is working for him. That is the transition that a lot of people make with infinite banking. Because if you're paying all these debts, all these kind of things, not really putting your money to work, infinite banking, step one, get rid of bad debt. Step two, use good debt to create wealth. I mean, that's really what it's that simple. Not going to say it's easy, by the way, but those are the two basic steps. So some things to keep in mind with infinite banking and how these policies work. And I'm going to go through some of these in a bit more detail. So we didn't talk about the death benefit. I'm going to talk about it a bit, just so you're aware of it. The loans never have to be repaid, by the way. So I'm going to go through what that means. The internal values inside of it, the dividends come in tax-free. So your cash value grows tax-free, by the way. Policies are exempt from judgments and liens in most states, so it protects your money. And then you can always create tax-free income in retirement with this strategy through the loans, by the way. So there's lots of ways to use this. Let's talk about the death benefit for a second here. So I don't really refer to it as a death benefit. I refer to it as generational wealth. What do I mean by that? Well, look at this example here. This is a female, age 42. Okay. She's putting in $20,000 for the first 5 years. By the way, this is a real client. Putting in $20,000 for 5 years, and then you can see the premium drops down. She has that option, the way that I built this policy for her. But look at this. Look at the death benefit in year one. At year one, she put in $20,000. The death benefit is $325,000. Do the math on that. That is many, many, many times more than what she put in. But look at the death benefit year over year. It's going up. It always goes up, by the way. It goes up for the rest of her entire life. So look at this. At year 5, she has now put in $100,000 in deposits. She has access to $99,000, pretty much 100% of what she's put in. She has access to in 5 years, right? But look at this. The death benefit is $483,000, almost 5 times what she has put in. No, more than that. More than that, a lot more than that. No, yeah, 100,000. Yeah, so it's worth 4.8 times what she's put into it. But look at this. She reduces her premium down to $3,257, that deposit per year. But look at this. The cash value went up by $6,750. In year 7, the same amount goes in, and yet it went up by $7,189. That's compound interest right there. So it's jumping up by more than she put into it. And look at the death benefit. It keeps on going up. By year 7, it's $500,000 or $499,521. So that death benefit is tax-free and guaranteed. That's generational wealth, because you're taking $1 and turn it into $5, $10 for the next generation, guaranteed, or whomever the beneficiary is. So that's how this thing can create wealth perpetually. Okay, because more policies, more wealth, etc. Let's talk about the policy loans. So the policy loans, which is your cash value, are guaranteed. Okay, there are no credit checks. There's no approval. Ask and you shall receive. Pretty simple. The loans are also private. This is one of the coolest things about infinite banking is you go get a car loan, it's on your credit report. You go get a policy loan and buy a car, it does not show up on your credit report. It's a private loan. Very cool. There are no minimum or maximum payments on the policy loan. You are the one in control. If you miss a payment, nothing happens because there is no required payment on these loans. You choose the loan structure or the policy loan payback structure. It's up to you. Another question we get quite a bit is how can I fund my policy? Well, that premium deposit can be monthly, can be quarterly, can be annually, and that premium is not for the rest of your life. It goes down and sometimes has to go to zero at some point down the road. But here's the thing, even if it does do that, the cash value and death benefit still continue to go up. There's a minimum and a maximum premium for everybody. The minimum is just 10 times your age per month. That's not the recommended premium. It's just the minimum to make it work. The maximum depends upon the individual and your gross income, typically 20% in that range of your gross income annually. So like if you're $100,000 of income, $20,000 is the maximum annual premium. Divide that by 12 for monthly. Now, in addition, you saw this on some of the examples, in addition to the premium deposit, you can fund the policy upfront with a large dump in. We call that dump in. Zero, could be 5, 10, $100,000. If you put in like, let's say $10,000 dump in, 90% of it, approximately 90% goes to the cash value and you can borrow out within 30 days. So roughly 50 to 90% of what goes in is available within 30 days as cash value. But as the dividends come in, they add to the cash value too. It's going to be over 100% eventually. So that's very, very cool when that happens. And so the question, you think about this, and you saw it already. I'm going to show you an example here. Would you ever put $1 into an ATM in order to get $3 back out? So in this example here, this person put in $10,000 annual premium, and they did a $50,000 dump in or lump sum upfront. Okay. Now that means that at the beginning of the policy, they put in $60,000. At the end of the first year, after dividends have come in, they have access to $55,000 of cash value. That is pretty incredible. 90+% of what they put in, they have access to. And they have access to cash value immediately within 30 days, by the way. But these are all end of year numbers. But check this out. Let's look at year two. In year two, they put in $10,000 premium deposit. At the end of the year, their cash value has jumped up by $10,607, more than they put into it. But let's look at year 11. In year 11, this person puts in $3,120, but the cash value went up by $10,590. They're getting more money growth in the policy than they're putting into the whole thing because of compound interest, uninterrupted. And by the way, they're using the cash value, you see that right here, at the exact same time, but nothing on this page, none of these numbers change, even though they're using the money outside of the policy for something else. Now, I want to share this quote by Warren Buffett, and this quote is this. It says, if poor people would just do what rich people do, they wouldn't be poor anymore. Now, I don't quite agree with that because, well, rich people sometimes have access to other things, but here's the way I like to look at this. If poor people had the knowledge of the wealthy and took action with that knowledge, they wouldn't be poor anymore. That's kind of my way of looking at it because it's really about knowledge. It's not doing what the rich do, it's having access to the knowledge. And this is what we're talking about in this presentation. So once again, my link is brian.beyourOwnbanker.com/TBCT. That allows you to schedule a call with me. All right, so another question I get is, well, Brian, why should I work with you? Well, I've been teaching infinite banking for over 9 years. I've done presentations on stage and webinars, private groups, been teaching thousands of people about this for many, many years. We also here at the BYOB team and the Money Multiplier, we have an entire team that works with you and sets up infinite banking for you. And we continually work with you before, during, and after you have a policy. We are one of the largest, if not the largest producer of infinite banking policies in the United States. So we do have quite a bit of experience. Our team has been doing this for quite some time. I currently have over 100 clients in underwriting. So I've got quite a few people I'm working with right now. We do provide ongoing support and services. That is a key thing that makes us a bit different than a lot of other people because we will support you ongoing to use the policy correctly. So any questions, any challenges that come up, all I got to do is reach out. And there's no cost to you. So there is no fees, there's no charges. So if anybody tells you that, hey, yeah, we do infinite banking, it's $1,000 fee to work with us, run away. Just run away because that is very dangerous. And then another question I get quite a bit is an IUL or VUL infinite banking. So that's an indexed universal life or variable universal life. The short answer is no. IULs and term insurance has its place, by the way. They all have their place, but they pay extremely high commissions, whereas infinite banking pays a lot less commissions, about 70% less, which if you've ever talked to a financial advisor and they say, don't do infinite banking, don't do life insurance, go invest your money with me in the stock market. This is probably one of the main reasons why is one, they don't understand infinite banking, and two, they don't want to take a big cut into commissions. But we do volume, so that's how we can do this. And we have a large team that just does it. And we only do infinite banking. Yes, we have some other services, but we mainly just do infinite banking. Keep this in mind. In life, one of two things will happen to us. We live, so are we better off with infinite banking or without? And we die. Are we better off with or without it? So obviously better off with it in our lives. Now, let me kind of tell you how I came into infinite banking. So this is a quick little story. So I call this a tale of two people. By the way, it's me. I was originally group one, this guy right there. I said, hey, you know what? I've heard about infinite banking. I didn't really know what it is, anything about it. And I said, I don't need any kind of help. I'm going to go to my buddy, the financial advisor, by the way, and I'm going to get a policy because I need life insurance. And there's apparently some cash value thing that we can do. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, I can do this. And he set me up with a VUL. Variable universal life. That was my first thing in early 2013 or somewhere around that time frame. I got a VUL and it was horrible. I ended up losing multiple six figures of net worth because of this whole thing. It caused me a lot of heartache, and I didn't know about it for years. Fast forward to 2016, and all of a sudden I came across a gentleman by the name of Pat, and he became my mentor. And I realized what infinite banking really was. And I realized I had gone with the wrong person. I said, hey, I see these people over here talking about it. And by the way, they were the people that I should have talked to. That was Pat and his team. And I said, hey, I don't know those guys. I want to go to my buddy down the road. And this was my financial advisor that some bad things happened to eventually. And I ended up losing a lot of money. But when I went to the next group, later on down the road, who became my mentor, man, it completely changed my whole outlook on infinite banking. And I realized I want to be part of group two. So whenever it comes to like, yeah, don't be group one, by the way. Go at it alone. Do your research. Talk to people, to have multiple phone calls. Don't just go to someone and just say, go do this for me. Definitely do your research. Get that knowledge, because that's the thing that I did not do, and it cost me quite a bit. So here it is. Here's the next steps, by the way. Let's just hop on a call. Let's solve your problems and answer your questions, and just see if infinite banking is a fit for you. Because I am not going to tell you that infinite banking is a fit for everybody. It is not a fit for everybody. But if it is a fit for you or someone in your life, that is an incredible privilege to have this available to you and being able to do this in your life. All right, everybody. Appreciate all of you being here and look forward to talking to you guys soon.